Welcome back, Blooms. I am so excited today to introduce you to my friend, New York Times bestselling author, award-winning author, novelist of around 30 books now, the phenomenal Karen White. If you have not discovered her books yet, you are missing a huge treat. And I hope today will tell you all about her newest novel that hasn't even hit shelves yet. So you'll hear all the behind the scenes scoop about the last night in London. Welcome, 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 Karen.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you, Julie.
I'm so glad you're here with us. We don't have long today. We only have about 20 or 30 minutes. So I want to welcome everybody to pop in with questions while we have you and engage any way they want. But start by telling us about this new novel that hasn't even hit shelves yet. It is going to be so good. It's about World War II, set in London, time slip. Tell us about this story.
So this is the book that has been decades in the making. I lived in London for 7 years. I lived in a building called Harley House, and that is the setting for this book. My mother's from Mississippi, and it was always fun seeing a Southern woman in London. People making fun of her accent, and so I've always wanted to write a book about an expatriate, especially a Southern expatriate. I've also been wanting to write a book with Maddie Warner, who was in my earlier books, Falling Home and After the Rain. And I've been getting emails ever since those books came out saying, whatever happened to Maddie Warner? And then also in my collaboration with Beatrice Williams and Lauren Willig, All the Ways We Said Goodbye, that favorite character of everybody was a woman, a Southerner, a model in the 60s in Paris named Precious Dubose, who in that book, she hints of something of a past in London during World War II, and we never find out what that is. So here's your chance to find out what that is, what the secret is behind Precious Dubose. And so in Harley House, London has this wonderful history, especially the Blitz. And the Blitz is something I've been fascinated with for years and years. Because when I moved into the building in London, our porter said, the reason why half these windows are just plain glass instead of latted glass is because during the Blitz, they were shattered. And that's why, I was living in this building where it had been built in 1903 or 1904. And I couldn't help but think, my gosh, all the lives this building has witnessed. Somebody slept in this bedroom during the Blitz when 9 months of nightly bombing. My gosh, what would that have been like? So I always wanted to kind of revisit that. I wanted to revisit Maddie. I wanted to revisit Precious. So this is a little bit Southern fiction, historical fiction, but mostly a story about two very strong women with pasts they need to overcome. So we have Maddie Warner. She is a freelance journalist, and she is hired by an old friend from junior year abroad in England, who is now an editor with British Vogue. And there's going to be Precious Dubose. It's her 100th birthday, and she is donating all of her gorgeous clothes from her modeling days to the London Fashion Museum, which is a real thing. I didn't know either. And then, so Maddie is being hired to write the article to interview Precious about her time in a life of crisis, and her life in a time of crisis, about the fashions and about the history. And of course, when Maddie starts interviewing Precious, that's when the layers start coming back and the real secrets and the real stories of both their lives come to the forefront.
Nobody writes Southern women female characters better than you, Karen. You go into all the layers and complexities of personalities and just nail these characters with such depth. And I love that about your writing. So you're combining all my favorite things: historical research, strong female characters, some little secrets that get uncovered. But you also have a lot of history about World War II and the Blitz that took place in London, like you were saying about the bombing. And, it's something we can't relate to here as modern Americans living in a war zone. And I cannot begin to imagine that. So for you to transport us into that time and space and try to live that kind of challenge and horror, really, but I know you'll do it with such grace. Tell us a little bit about the research that you discovered. I know you've got some pictures to share with us today. Do you want to bring some of those up and show us the bombs in some different things?
Where's that? So that is basically the a consolidation of all the bombs that fell in Greater London in just 9 months. And my flat was like in the northwest. I was in the northwest of London, right on Regent's Park. And if you can imagine, and there's Harley House, that's where I lived. It's been there. I mean, yeah, it's been there for a long time. But yeah, it survived. I mean, there were some direct hits very close by. A lot of buildings aren't there anymore, but I mean, the Blitz didn't spare anybody. I love doing the research. A lot online, a lot of, oh, I did know I had to research some of my Britishisms by interviewing one of my British friends to make sure I'd gotten all of that right. And I had a few things wrong because it had been a while. Yes, that's me in 1981
Awesome.
at the door. Sorry, that is a Walkman. That was the 80s. Okay. I don't know what I'm wearing or what I'm doing, but yeah, as a teenager, 7 years I lived there, and so I really have the feel of London. I know the lay of the land in terms of the tube station. I've never been to Oh, that's my junior prom picture. That's inside the flat, and the reason why I show this is because my junior prom was at the Savoy Hotel, which we'll see a picture in a minute. There you go. uh, where there's a lot of scenes that in the book that take place at the Savoy, because it was a hotbed of intrigue during the war. Now I can't remember what I was saying. Something about doing the research for London. Oh, I never got to make it to the Churchill War Rooms because it wasn't open yet. It had not been open to the public yet. And then when I was writing this book, I had meant to go to London. We had planned a trip, and then things in my personal life kind of went haywire, and that got postponed. And then COVID. So I did not get a chance to go to London. So I did have to rely on British friends to kind of fill me in and answer some questions. But I cannot wait to go back to London and go to the Churchill's War Rooms. I will say that in many of the books that I read, I discovered almost a crush, but really just huge admiration for Winston Churchill. So he was very handsome when he was younger. Okay, so
Oh,
okay, no, that's not him. This is the inspiration for the main character, my
I like
RAF
him.
pilot. I know who doesn't look. Oh my gosh,
Yeah, that's a
that is
look,
a.
huh?
I was researching something, and RAF pilots. I wanted to know about the uniforms and about the colors and everything. And this is a random photo on Pinterest. No identification, nothing. But I'm like, okay, he's in the book.
He's
So
worth
that is,
writing about, yeah.
yes, because I have an RAF pilot in my book, and I'm like, why can't he look like that? And yeah, I knew I had to write a book around him. So yeah.
I love that when you come across a random photograph and it just speaks to you, and then you want to write a
Mm-hmm.
story and figure out what this person's life might have
Right.
been, what their story might
Right.
have been. And,
Right.
as long as I've known you, you've always been one of the most glamorous people that I've ever known. Like, you
Oh,
just
bless
kind of
you.
walk into a room with this regal, just, I don't know, a light. And now I know you spent 7 years in London. What took you to
Yeah.
London during your teen years? I mean, that definitely had an impact on you for sure. In many
Oh,
ways, you're still
absolutely.
seeing. Yeah.
Right. So my father was an executive with London, excuse me, with Exxon. I'm sorry. I have only had 2 cups of coffee today, as you can see. So
You're
no, my
okay.
father was an executive with England, and we moved. We lived in Venezuela. We lived in The Hague. We lived in New York. Well, in New Jersey, while my dad worked in New York. I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We lived in Houston, but then we did live in, and the longest we lived anywhere was in London, and we didn't own a car those 7 years, which was wonderful. That is the best way to get to know a city, is to walk it. And we walked it. We took public transportation. That's why, the tube map is tattooed in the back of my brain. When we have gone to visit, even, before I wrote this book, even, like I could just, there are some new lines and new stations that I had to kind of refresh, my memory. But basically, I could just walk into any tube station and like, oh yeah, that's the Circle line. If I take it 2 stops, I could just change here and do that, and yeah, but that really was my home. It was the longest I lived anywhere until I got married. And now we've lived in the Atlanta area for almost 30 years now. So now obviously that's home, but I still have such a soft spot for London.
Yeah, it is hard to call one place home when you've lived so many places, and you do get to know a place and the culture when you live there in a way that you don't
Hmm.
when you get to travel. So I love to read, which I found really interesting because I've always felt like you've written a lot about the Low Country, and I've always
Right.
looked to you as one of the premier writers about that region and that area, but you've never actually lived there. But you have really done a good job capturing that culture. Was it different writing about someplace you have lived versus someplace you haven't lived? Did you feel different?
Um, No, because the thing with the Low Country, it's the first time I ever visited Charleston. I felt like I was home.
Yeah.
There was something, and it's kind of a weird story, but my daughter was doing our genealogy because she wanted to see if we were eligible for Daughters of the American Revolution. And my father's family has been in the United States for over 200 years. So she was doing that because she lived in DC and they have like a really exciting chapter there. I'm like, okay, cool. So she found, not only did she find Revolutionary War soldiers on both sides in South Carolina and North Carolina, but we had people living on Broad Street and Meeting Street, in the early 1800s, and just and own property, out in the country, and it just blew my mind because I always felt that, like, I can only write about a place that I have a connection to. I know people say, "Oh, Martha's Vineyard is beautiful," or "Nantucket's gorgeous," and I agree. I've been there, absolutely gorgeous. Sedona is beautiful, but I don't get that feeling. And in my books, my setting is as much a character as the actual characters. So if I don't have that feeling, I can't write about it. So that's why when I write about the Low Country, I feel like I know it. I know the smell of the pluff mud. It's like I was born and raised in it, even though I wasn't. So it's very
It's
strange.
fascinating to me that you said that. Oh, somebody commented, Susie Baldwin saying, "Hi, Karen, can't wait to read this new book of yours, The Last Night in London. Love all your books." Thank you
Thank
for
you, Susie.
commenting, Susie.
Appreciate that.
It's fascinating that you mentioned that about the ancestry because when I wrote my first novel, for some reason I wrote about the Choctaw and I didn't know
Yes.
why. And I didn't have any clue at that time that I have deep ancestral roots, many ancestors in the Choctaw tribe, but I didn't know that when I was writing about it. And
Interesting.
when I started to do the research, the Choctaw chief told me, maybe this is a story that an ancestor has given you. And so when you said that, I just got chills because I thought, something
Oh,
brought you back to
wow.
Charleston, something brought you
Right.
back to those roots, even though you didn't know that you had those roots there. It called you back home. I think that's
Right.
fascinating, Karen.
It
That's
is. I love your story too. I remember that book. I love that book. And I find it amazing that you didn't know the connection when you wrote that book. It's
No, I
incredible.
didn't. But let's get back to you. Tell me more about when you traveled to London. Did you said that when you first moved there that you saw that the windows had been blown out and replaced with plain windows, and so
Hmm.
that was years ago. This story sat inside you for a very long time. That little spark before you came back and revisited, and you
Right.
also revisited the characters from previous books that you wanted to do a little bit more with. I love how these dots all connected and brought you to
Hmm.
this story. Do you feel like
Hmm.
this is the story you've been waiting to write? Like,
Oh,
all your life.
absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely. And I think I just had to wait for the right time, because it's a reunion of characters and settings. Because in the end of the Last Night in London, we go back to small town Walton, Georgia, which was the setting for Falling Home and After the Rain. Because I can't give anything away, but yes. So I love fish out of water stories. So at first we have, Maddie going to London. Now she did spend her year abroad there, but she's been living and working in the United States. And of course she has her crazy, very Southern family calling her and texting her. And, she's, her sister's getting married. They want her to go back. And she's like, oh, but there's also other things about her past and her family that why she doesn't want to go home. But when she does, we also have, British character there. And I love, because there's my favorite scene in the whole book. In the earlier books, we have Biddy's beauty salon. Every Southern town has a Biddy's beauty salon, right? And
yeah,
they're doing the curlers and everything.
it's a whole day.
And yeah, exactly. So they're getting ready. It's the sister's wedding, so they're getting the hair, they're
Oh,
everything done, right? And
yeah.
and somebody says, "Oh my gosh, there's somebody who talks like Prince William. He's coming this way." And and as soon as he walks in and he says something, one of them just shoves like a magazine at him. Read from this, anything, just read out loud, because they're so enamored with his accent. And I remember that happening because I have relatives in Mississippi, and when I would go home to visit, or my mother's family, everybody thought because I lived in London, I would have a British accent. So everybody was saying, just say something, like, well,
Just talk. I
I
lived
know.
in Oxford, Mississippi for 17 years, so that's kind of where I
Yes.
called home for a long time. What part of Mississippi is your family from?
So from the Delta, my
Mhm.
dad actually was born in Macomb and raised in
Oh.
Biloxi, and then my mom born and raised in Indianola.
Oh, wow, they are Mississippi.
Oh yeah, they call the Delta the most southern place on earth.
It
So
truly
very,
is. It
yeah, and you
truly
need
is. There's no place like it.
translators if you ever go down there and talk to the locals.
Sometimes you do, but there's no place like it, and I love that
No,
you
agree.
know that. It's a very special place for sure, and I love that you know that. Okay, so tell me about your family. You have children that are grown and flown, and you were talking about life interrupting. You're in that sandwich generation where you have children
Mm.
who still need you, but parents now who need you, and dogs who
Yes,
need you. There's a lot
yes,
pulling on you on the top of writing. So how are you meeting those challenges? And I know a lot of readers will be able to relate to that, just
right.
feeling so overwhelmed, especially this year more than ever. Tell us about some of that and how you're still making time to explore your talents and get these books out.
Yeah,
No small things.
it's a struggle. It's become more of a job than it's ever been. Luckily, there's wine and medication.
Pick
I'm
your
sorry, did
poison.
I say that out loud?
Pick your poison. So I was at it with a
I
friend once, and she said, "We all need something to get us through the night. Whatever it is, don't feel guilty."
I know, and it because my doctor's like, you needed my stress level was really, really bad, and he's like, your numbers are really bad, your hair is falling out, your teeth are,
Right.
not good, your skin. I had like an unidentified rash on my face. He's like, look, we got to do something here. So, but you know what? I've never been one of those writers who loved writing. I'm one of those writers who love having written. So, which makes this, I am the number one procrastinator. So, what I do, I give myself treats because I still love to read. So, I'm like, okay, I'm going to write a page. And once I write a page, then I can read. Or I'm not going to have breakfast until I've written 3 pages. And so I have to reward myself. It's horrible because I can't say I'm only going to write for 45 minutes because I'm watching the clock and then I'll be like, what, checking social media. I've turned off all notifications. I know social media is important, but it really draws me in, and with taking care of my parents and everything else, I don't have a lot of extra time, and so I have to be ruthless. I have a book coming out, so I have to spend more time on social media. Which, believe me, I'd love nothing more than to be doing cute videos and posting, and But I'm sorry, but I've got 2 books I'm working on. I'm a collaboration and a spinoff series for the Trad Street series. So it's exhausting,
It
But
is.
yeah,
I think every author's feeling that way, kind of spread too
yeah,
thin, and the
yeah. I
pressures that
know.
piling on us more and more by the day to do it all. So,
Right.
yeah, that's no joke for sure. But I like your idea about giving yourself treats, and I'm with you. Like I love the research, I love the reading, I love meeting the readers and me interviewing people. All of those things I love actually more
Mhm.
than the actual writing.
Oh, yeah.
I like the writing too, but that's the fun part for me. So I'm with you.
Right.
I hear you on
Yeah,
all that. Okay, tell us about your babies, your dogs, because I know that's a huge part of your social media posts when you do go post on social media.
I do. So, I have 2 Havanese, Quincy and Sophie. Sophie's here napping. She doesn't leave my side. Quincy's 14 and in a diaper and deaf, um, which
Poor Quincy.
I know, right? But he's like completely oblivious that there's anything wrong, and just
He's
like,
happy.
he's, yeah, totally. But he does have sundowning, which is because I think he has doggy dementia.
Mm.
So we roofie him at about 6 o'clock so that he's calm, because otherwise he's antsy and wants to go out, 400 times. And then we have Sophie. She just turned 6 on February 22nd. And she is the happiest dog on the planet and just loves everyone. And neither one of my dogs shed. And they're both, she's definitely submissive, which thank goodness, because 14 years with an alpha dog, it's like I can't deal with this anymore. Quincy's the type that when you go, come on, let's go inside, he stops. Even though he was on his way inside, he'll stop, look at you, and then look the other way and then go the other way. He's so annoying.
Just to spite you, just to let you know he's in control.
Exactly. Sophie listens better, although she gets into mischief when I'm not paying attention to her. So
She just wants your attention and your love.
yes, yes.
Well, I love that you're a dog person. Animals are a wonderful part of my life, so I love that you do that. And now, going back to the book, it's also got really interesting, intriguing spy element in there.
Yeah,
You tell us
yeah.
a little bit about that.
You know what? I'm trying to think where the genesis of that. I do know. So Beatrice Williams, who I collaborate with,
Mhm.
she is the fountain of all news information and like bizarre news. Like she subscribes to the Daily Mail and the Telegraph and several, British newspapers, and they're always doing these obituaries of these really amazing, because this is the time all of our World War II heroes are dying at an alarming rate. And very often, there'll be an obituary to somebody who did like such heroic deeds during the war that you cannot believe that they then survived to be 99 years
Yeah.
old. And, so she'll send these things and she'll say dibs, like, this is my character or whatever. But, you can piece together a lot of this stuff and just the whole spy, it was so prevalent
Mhm.
in London, I
Mhm.
mean, in the United States too, they had people, Germans long before the war started embedded into American society. So ever since I wrote my book on Folly Beach, where I learned that, and then I started learning more and more about, the whole spy networks, and there's so many books out, and I was reading biographies of women spies, and I'm just like, this is too big of a thing not to really exploit in this novel about the Blitz.
Mhm.
So of course I did, and I just enjoyed the research so much. It was really James Bond and a little bit of Get Smart. Some of the little things that they used,
But
it,
female
Fe-
spies.
yes, and
Yeah.
but also there's female and male in here, and there's bad guys and there's good guys, and you're not always sure who's who.
And
Which
betrayals and secrets and sins and all of it.
and
Yeah.
that whole thing about not, be careful, don't say secrets in public, and even though you think you're alone or you think that they're harmless, doesn't always happen that way. So
I love
remember,
that.
loose lips sink ships, I think, was in the United States. They have those posters everywhere. Very true, especially in London, because if you think of, Adolf Hitler, his goal was to get England into submission, and they would not. They would not. I mean, he bombed them and wouldn't do it. Thank you, Winston Churchill. He didn't win the war single-handedly, but it was because of him that England did not capitulate to the Nazis, because
Yeah.
the war would have had a completely different result. So,
And we were just
yeah,
talking about the importance of a strong, stable, steady, calm leader. His
right,
saying was what, Karen? Keep calm and carry on, or something like that?
exactly,
Keep
yeah,
calm and carry on. So no matter, I mean, your
hmm
bombs are falling everywhere, and he's saying, "Keep calm and carry on."
right,
He
right,
knew the importance of keeping people stable and steady with a
right.
calming presence.
Right. And we
Carry
are all in this together. I think
on.
he
Mhm.
coined that phrase, because we are all British. We, as a British people, must stand together. And they
United.
did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
And after a night of bombing, people would get up, like, survey the damage. Okay. Then start sweeping the sidewalks. And even if they didn't have a shop front anymore, they would put their wares out on the sidewalk, business as usual. And it's that famous British stiff upper lip, which is amazing. I mean, I
Mhm.
think us today
Yeah.
could really learn a few things.
We can learn a
Um,
lot from looking back at history, and that's why I think these kind of novels
mhm,
are so important, because you bring it to a different audience who might not go
right,
back and do that research. We might,
right,
these might not be readers who necessarily have the time or the interest to go dig through the actual
right.
archives, but you delivering it to us in a novel that's split time and appropriate to a
Mhm,
modern audience, that's the power
mhm.
of story, Karen. So thank you for
Yeah,
doing that for us. We're
thank
about to
you.
wrap up here. If anybody has any questions for Karen, please comment quickly. But you can also comment below in the recording. It will be on Bloom, and we want to offer you a giveaway. So, Karen, do you want to tell us about that?
Yes, I'm going to give away a copy of my latest book when it comes out. It doesn't come out till April 20th, but I will make sure you get your copy. It's going to be signed. Um, and if you can answer part B of the question, I'll throw something extra into the package. So,
And what's part B? So the question is, how many dogs do you have?
how many dogs do I have? Part B, if you get it right, what are their names?
How many dogs does she have and what are their names? If you listen to this video, you'll know, or you can go look at Karen's social media channels. Where can they find you?
So on Instagram at Karen White Write, Write,
Okay.
and on Twitter at Karen White Write, and Facebook is Karen White Author or Author Karen White, whatever. If you go to my website, all the links are there to all of my social media.
Perfect. And I think anybody needs to try to say Karen White Write 5 times fast because that's
What was I thinking?
that's hard to say. Karen, thank you so much for being with us. I cannot wait for this book to hit shelves and to cheer it for you. I love you, and I'm so glad you got this book out. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know it's been a rough couple of years, and you just keep giving us these gems. So thank you for that.
Wonderful. Thank you for doing this. You're a gem, Julie. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here with us. We've had fun talking to you, and follow Karen along for the news about this new book.
Yeah.
The Last Night in London. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.